In less than a minute, a hacker can take over your Linux system and become root. In this video, I'll show you the step-by-step they can take and also how you can defend against it. Now, the first thing they might do is to scan your Linux system to see which doors you have open, which gates or doors, windows you have open, so to say, which ports are open. They use a tool often called Nmap, and with Nmap they can scan for ways into your system, which can be any port, right? It can be remote access port, it can be web port, database port, all kind of ports might be open on your Linux system. So with Nmap they can scan for open ports. Let's scan the target, and it takes a second or so and it will tell about open ports. Now, once we found which open ports there are as an attacker, we can then further escalate. So here we have the user or the port open SSH, which for remote control, and it's port 22 that is open. You'll see here state open. Service SSH for remote access. System administrators often use this SSH, and every port has a number. In this case, this port is number 22. So they might try to connect to it, and it might be that they know your first name. So it might be from LinkedIn or other sources, they might know your name. So they could try to log in over SSH, and they could do a brute force password attack. So automatically try many different passwords to get into your system. If you choose a weak password, they already have initial access into your system. So let's say they have this initial access. Now, you check, now we are user Frank on this Linux system, but we want to become administrator. We want to be root. So one simple way could be if they use passwords reuse, if they use the same password again for the root user. So we could try that. And you'll see in this case, the password of the root user is not the same as the regular user. So they might try the sudo command, for example, sudo ls. And with sudo command, you run things as administrator. So some users can do that if those permissions are set incorrectly. Now, in this case, you'll see I'm not allowed to run this ls command as root on the box. You could try the different commands. And you'll see that the command is not allowed. So to see which commands we can run as sudo, we can run the command sudo space -l. And here we see different commands we can run as sudo on the box. So we can use run apt, systemctl, vim, and python 3. Now you might wonder, how do you become administrator root using that? So for that, there is this website called GTFO bins. So we're going to use the system itself to get root access, administrator access. So in this case, we can use these commands as sudo. And one of them is here, vim. So let's say we run vim as sudo. Now in itself, it's just a text editor, this vim. And you see we need a specific path. We can't just say vim. So we actually user bin is this vim.basic. And now we are inside vim, this text editor. Now in here, we can use one of the tricks from GTFO bins. We can do escape : that runs a system command. And because we run it as sudo, it runs init as administrator. So the thing we'll start is the shell. You'll see here bin bash. I press enter. And you see we have instantly root. We are now administrator on this system. If I check who am I, you'll see I am now the user root. So this is one way we became root on the system. And this trick works if the binary, in this case this binary vim basic, has the SUID set. So if we check this SUID, you'll see here we have this S set in the permissions, which stands for SUID. We can run it as super user. So for vim, that's a very bad idea, but also for other programs, right? So here we have Python 3. We could try to run that. You see it just runs as regular. But what we can try to do is for using the sudo Python 3 and then make Python execute a shell. So we run Python as sudo, and then Python itself will start this shell. I press enter. Check who am I am root again, administrator again. So given initial access into a system, these SUIDs are one of the ways that an attacker, they can become root on their Linux system. It is not the only way. It could be password reuse, it could be vulnerability in the kernel or other ways, but this SUID is something to watch out for. You can defend against this kind of attack. You could start at the beginning of the chain, simply disabling any applications running on your Linux server, whether that's a web server, Nginx, Apache, SSH, any kind of server, disable it. Then this full attack becomes impossible, right? Because the first step that they gain access into the computer was scanning your computer with Nmap and then finding, okay, SSH is open, and then they got access through brute force, through password guessing. So if you disable any servers running on your Linux computer, this whole chain falls apart. This whole attack becomes impossible. Now, another way could be simply picking better passwords. So if you pick a better password, then it becomes really hard to get into the system as well. In this case, there was a very simple password, so it was easy to get in. Now, it's not always necessary for attackers to use passwords to get in your system, but it is one of the ways. If there is password login, they could be trying 12 million or 100 million passwords on your computer to get initial access. And if you have multiple users using your computer, there could be one or two that pick really bad passwords, right? Then the privilege escalation, you want to make sure that any sudo permissions are limited to the max, so that none of the standard Linux system applications can be used to become administrator. So you want to scan your system for any SUID bits set on applications in your Linux system, because if they are, they could give root access, administrator access into your Linux system for an attacker. So to defend against this, what you want to do is to find any programs that has this SUID bit set, any program, because those can be used to become administrator. So there's a single command you can do with it. You can use the command find, and then with find the permissions, if I run this command, it will list any programs on the Linux computer that has this SUID bit set. In this case, you'll find a bunch of them. Now, not every program can be used to escalate privilege to become root, but some of them can. For example, we use this vim.basic to become administrator, but you can find all of them on GTFO bins, gtfobins.github.io. You can find all these programs that if the SUID is set, how you can become administrator. So you want to make sure all of these programs, none of these programs, have this SUID bit set. So your user might be able to run sudo command. You can check that with the command sudo space -l, and it will tell you which commands you can run as administrator as sudo. So in this case, I type sudo -l, and you'll see the user, your current user, may run these commands on a box without any password, right? No passwords. So we can run these commands as administrator. Now you might think, okay, this is simply command to install software, apt, some general system control. We have this text editor and Python 3. You might wonder, what's the big deal? So if you can run a command as system administrator using sudo, you can use that to escalate your privileges. You can become root using those commands. Let me give you a demonstration. We can run this vim here. So we type sudo user bin vim basic, exactly the same as listed on this line, and press enter. Now, what I'm going to do is a track in vim, I press escape, colon. This is how you usually start type commands in vim. Exclamation mark, that runs a command. And then I type /bin/bash, that runs a shell. So I press enter. And you see I instantly became root on this Linux system. So I had initial access using a weak password. And then using this track in vim, I became administrator. I became root on this box. Now, this is not limited to vim. Any program that has the SUID bit set, you can become administrator. For example, here we have Python 3. We can run Python 3 without passwords. So I can say sudo Python 3 and run this command. So we import the OS and start a shell. Now, because we run it as sudo, as administrator, it will give us a root shell. So if I run this command and I check where am I, you'll see I am the user root. So again, I escalated my privileges and they became root because these programs have misconfigured permissions. So if I show you again sudo -l, these programs, and then list them, so ls-al, and then I'm going to check the permissions for this program. You'll see it has this S permission set. So when this S permission is set, it can run as super user, or SUID. We can then use it as sudo. Now, for some programs, that is extremely dangerous because a hacker can then become root in your Linux system. So you want to be careful not to have that S permission set. Typically, it is set using this command, u+x, with some program, u+s. So let's say user bin basic. Now, in this case, we cannot run the command csmod as administrator because that's not allowed. So let's become root again. So let's say we do this. And we can say chmod u plus x plus s user bin in basic. That gives that permission. So if I show you that line, you'll see that S is set, and you want to make sure that it's removed. So you can do chmod u minus s user bin slash bin basic, and then list it again. And now it no longer has it as set, so it cannot no longer be executed as administrator and sudo. And that way to escalate privileges no longer works. So what you want to do is to find any program on your Linux system that has that SUID bit set, because those can be used by a hacker to become root on your Linux system.